Welcome to Brainfluence. I'm Roger Dooley. Today we have a returning guest, Jantsch. He's a marketing consultant, speaker, entrepreneur, and author. His best-known title is Duct Tape Marketing, also the name of his network of consultants, which use, oddly enough, the duct tape methodology. This means John and I have a special relationship. Everyone knows you can fix anything with two things, duct tape and WD-40. My book, Friction, was called A Mental Can of WD-40, so it makes sense that between the two of us, we can fix just about anything. John's new book is The Ultimate Marketing Engine. Welcome to the show, John.
Oh, thanks for having me again. It's kind of fun. You know, this is my 7th book, and so I'm appearing on a lot of shows that I've been on before, which has really been a lot of fun, especially since we haven't been able to see anybody in real life. Seeing it as we are now has been great.
Well, I'm hoping that pretty soon we can meet up at a conference in person, John. Before we started, we were just talking about us both getting slowly back into the in-person gigs that are starting to open up again, at least in the United States.
Yep.
So I'll look forward to that. You know, I'm curious, how have you seen the pandemic change the world for your clients, who tend to be smaller businesses? Yeah. I mean, it had to be maybe in some cases particularly stressful, but maybe there was some opportunities there too.
Well, I mean, I think like all of us, there was a period of what's going to happen to the world, I think. And certainly some businesses were just in the wrong industry at, this time and really, really struggled. But I also saw a lot of my clients that I had actually not just survive, but really thrive. And not just because they were in some industry that saw greater demand. One of the things that really rang true for me, and actually this book we're going to talk about today, my latest book, I signed the contract for March 15th of 2020, and that was really right when all of this was starting to unfold. And I was kind of worried about, what am I going to write about? I don't want to write a book about how to market during the pandemic. Nobody certainly wants to read that book. But what I saw, that's right. But one of the things that the pandemic really shone a very bright light on for me was that, a lot of businesses grow and scale just because the economy and the momentum is going their way, whatever industry they're in. But in tough times, sometimes you really see businesses that thrive and survive because they're meaningful in the lives of their customers in some way. And that's what I saw a lot of. Businesses that had taken the time to really embrace their customers, really focus on their customers, really create great customer experiences. They were actually getting emails and calls from customers saying, look, what can we do? We'll stick with you. Don't worry. We're with you through this. And that's always really been true, but I just think that the struggles that a lot of us went through last year really shone a very bright light on that dynamic. And so that element, in probably more ways than one, shows up in this new book. The idea that we look at building customers for life, that we start to look at customers not for transactions, but for the transformation that we can bring to them. And that's really what informed kind of my whole path for writing this book.
Locally here in Austin, I saw that with some businesses where various restaurants handled the initiation of the pandemic in different ways.
You bet.
One in particular was very adept at converting to pickup and delivery and taking care of customers, very customer service oriented, because initially things did not go 100% perfectly, as you might imagine, where suddenly your business model has changed dramatically. But they did what it took. They fixed things if they were wrong. They credited you, and they were very transparent about everything. They talked about how they were keeping all of their people employed. They did not immediately lay off all of their people or some of their people. And I think that what they saw was a lot of community support.
Yeah.
Other businesses that were more transactional in nature struggled and did not get that same level of support for their customers.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you're going to see is, a lot of that behavior that changed out of necessity created some innovations that I think are going to be with us. QR code menus are probably not going away. Curb pickup, margaritas are probably not going away. So in some ways, while it was a very, very tough time, I think the fact that all friction, if I can borrow your term, all friction to change really went away, that I think it opened the door for some things that are going to be what we're going to live with. And so I think now, if I'm advising a lot of businesses, it's like, if you've got some new idea, now's the time to try it, because people have never been more open to change in their behavior.
Yeah, you kind of stole my next question for you, John, because I was going to ask you what you thought has changed permanently as we emerge. I think we're emerging from the pandemic. What's changed? And I would tend to agree that some of these convenience features like curbside and delivery, home delivery and such, those are going to be permanent features. I've seen it now where the stores here in Texas are wide open, but there's still a lot of people doing curbside, not because they fear getting infected, but because it's pretty darn convenient. They discovered how convenient it was and how they didn't have to spend an hour fighting their way through the grocery store at rush hour. They could simply place their order and pick it up in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and that's funny because, groceries chains have been trying to crack that nut for years, and nobody really had gotten much traction with it. But I agree with you. Now that people have experienced it, they've got all the apps set up, to do it and whatnot. It's like, hey, that's actually a better way. So I think you're going to see that stick with us as well. I tell you the one thing that I saw that is not a feature that somebody could add that I hope stays is that I think there was a real sense, because this impacted everyone in the world. I mean, we maybe we're in different boats, but we were all in the same ocean at sea and during the storm. And I think that there was a return, to in marketing or in business to a little more humanness, if you will, and kindness. Now, obviously, we've got lots and lots of examples of where that's not occurring, but I do hope that a lot of businesses really kind of stick with that vulnerability and that authenticity that seemed to really kind of come from this.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's sort of a bifurcation there, I think, John, because we've seen both. We've seen increasing human behavior on the part of businesses like restaurants and their customers. And at the same time, I just saw an article about some restaurant that shut down for a day because their customers were being so horrible to their people.
Yeah.
And I think that it's sort of a strange conundrum where we have this simultaneous license for bad behavior. And another data point is that airline incidents where there's disruptions on flights, they are at an all-time record, and probably mostly due to masking and maybe food items and such.
Yeah.
But but at the same time, other businesses are forging better connection with their customers, and that's partially because some customers are open to that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, John, what mistakes do you think businesses are making right now? Like, in other words, you see a lot of businesses, smaller businesses. Where do they tend to be going wrong, and what should they be doing to come out of this pandemic in a much stronger condition? Of course, that sort of sets up your book discussion of what they should be doing. But why don't you lead into that?
Well, I'd say the thing that I've been the first thing that I focus on when I go into work with a small business is still this thought that, hey, if I sell accounting services, then anybody in the world that might need a tax return is my potential customer. And so a big component of this book, one of the actual steps in the Ultimate Marketing Engine, is that I suggest that we should be focusing a great deal of our attention on the top 20% of our customers. And part of the reason for that is they're probably more profitable. They probably have the right problem, the right issue. You probably are delivering a great deal of value to them because of some unique set of circumstances. And so what if we took our attention of a growth of our business, and instead of just saying, hey, let's go out and get every new customer, what if we thought about scaling with that top customer that I guarantee you, or at least experience tells me, that 20% of them want to do 10 times more business with you, and some smaller percentage of them want to do 100 times more business with you. But we're so scattered, kind of sharing or using up the opportunity cost of just chasing the next lead, that we don't spend our time figuring out what could we do so that they would be so thrilled that they'd be customers for life and in fact become evangelists for our business.
Right. So how would a newish business, either a startup or a business that really needs to generate more revenue pretty quickly to stay in business, I mean, the temptation, of course, is to go after whoever will do business with you at that point. Yes, we got an order, we got a customer, even if it's not perfect. How do they, survive in the short term, but also be selective and be intentional in the kind of businesses they seek out?
Yeah, so there's two things at play here. You absolutely have to pay the bills. That you can take business that maybe isn't a good fit or that you don't think is a good fit. But the real key is, how are you messaging? How are you communicating who you work with, who you can best serve? Because some of the reason we attract clients that aren't great fits is because we aren't teaching people, how to be an ideal client or what an ideal client looks like. And so a lot of what that comes down to is, it's not necessarily a matter of saying, nope, we're not doing any business with these people. It's we're developing a process to educate them, to convert them, to onboard them that actually ensures that we not only attract the right client, but that they understand how to work with us and how to get the most value. That's sometimes we get bad clients sometimes because we teach them to be bad clients. They ask for this deal or they want a special price or, we bend to this whim, and next thing you know, we're basically all over the place. And if you create a very systematic process for how you teach somebody what it is that you do, as I said, how you convert them, how you onboard them, then in effect, you're creating ideal clients.
And really, it sort of pervades all aspects of your marketing and the way you do your customer relations and everything else. Because if you're a financial planner, theoretically, everybody on the planet needs financial planning help of some kind, whether it's getting out of debt or maximizing their retirement savings or minimizing taxes on their windfall or whatever. But chances are, if you are a financial planner, you are best at a particular target market, or perhaps you should choose a target market that you can serve very well and keep serving that kind of client. So maybe it is, people with net worth of 1 to 5 million who are 10 years or less away from retirement or something like that, where there you can really target your services. You become an expert in all those aspects, and also your messaging is clear. So when that person sees your website, your ads, whatever, they say, oh, okay, this sounds like me. I need to talk to this person, as opposed to the CPA down the street who doesn't seem to really say what they do other than help you.
Well, and while that is absolutely everything you said there, I absolutely agree with. One element that I inject in that I'd like to suggest is an innovation in this book is that financial planner should also be creating what I call the customer success track. And so those people that they are attracting come to them in a certain stage. And that stage has characteristics which you can identify, which you can describe. It probably has some challenges in terms of the goals they're trying to reach, but you also can identify that what if I help them reach those goals? How can I move them to the next stage? And so that financial planner could actually map out, here's who we attracted, here's where they are right now, but here's where they want to go. And so we can create the entire blueprint of products or service offerings or education or whatever it involves, where we are not just talking about, hey, we're the best option for you today. We're the best option to mature with you and grow with you and give you the transformation, ultimately get you from where you are today to where you want to be, not just sell you products and services. And that approach or that mindset or point of view, I think really can help. It can actually create a mission for a business. It could certainly inform their products and services, but also their training and the ability to really scale with their customers instead of going out and looking for new customers.
Yeah, one of the things you talk about later on in the book is that process of scaling with your customers and using them as a part of a network. That may seem kind of foreign to some businesses where they feel like, boy, I'm so grateful this person is already my client, this business is already my customer. I don't want to impose on them or bug them in any way. They're already doing so much for me. But how do you get them to be on your team and you become part of their team?
Well, some of it's mindset. I mean, what you just described, belies the fact that you are generating tremendous value for them. Why wouldn't they want to share that with their friends, neighbors, and colleagues? I mean, some of that's just up here, right in the head. But you're right. The entire last step 5, is scale with your customers by impacting. I have to read it almost, but by serving their entire ecosystem. And what I mean, essentially, that in the last section of the book is all about referral generation. But it's not simply about asking for referrals. One of there are many tactics, but one of the tactics that I suggest in that is that you actually start looking at all the other service professionals or products or services or needs that they have, and start asking, how can I become a source of referrals for those services to them? How can I build a strategic partner network, for example, where if my clients need anything, related or unrelated to what I do, that I would actually be able to recommend somebody that I trust. So that's one of the elements. But the other element is, how could I actually work with their other providers so that we're actually both providing even more value? So, for example, one of the examples I cite in the book is we had an author, speaker, influencer come to us and said, look, I've built a nice brand, but it's kind of all over the place. I've written 3 books. I don't have any products to sell with those. So it's kind of like whatever speech they hired me for, that's my brand. So they hired us to kind of create a cohesive brand, to bring all of their things together, to help them develop some products and things. So kind of standard brand stuff. And she, at the time, was also working with an executive coach who was helping her build a team internally of folks to support kind of her growth. And so we went to work immediately with that executive coach and taught him, here's exactly what we're doing, here's what we're recommending, here's the idea behind all of this. And so all of a sudden, by working with that executive coach, another one of her providers, which we just volunteered to do, we were actually able to give him the roadmap that he needed to actually do a better job with his work. And so we both now were able to provide, I think, even more value to our mutual client. But guess what? That coach also became a pretty active referral source for referring his other clients to us because he just appreciated that approach. So there are many ways that you can scale with your clients. It's not just asking them for referrals. So that's that last whole section of it is sort of a masterclass in all the ways to really get referral, word of mouth thinking ingrained in your business.
That's great. And then, of course, you could be a source of referrals for that coach, too. If you start working with a company where the leader is clearly kind of all over the place and needs more hand-holding than you can provide, then that works that way, too.
Absolutely.
So since we're kind of jumping around in order, John, why don't you provide sort of the 40,000-foot level of the 5-step process?
Yeah, so we have, I think we've covered them all, actually, but just not in any order.
Okay, well, let's put them in order.
Yeah, exactly. So the first step is to map where your customers are today and where they want to be. That's the essentially the customer journey and the customer success map. The second one is to uncover the real problems you solve for your ideal customers. And let me give you a hint. It's not what you sell. Nobody wants what we sell. They want their problems solved. And so we spend an entire section on really getting into that idea. The third one is we talked about this idea of narrowing your focus to your top 20% of your ideal client so that you can really figure out how to grow with them. Now, all this strategy work in the first 3 steps comes together in attracting more ideal clients. So we spend a lot of time talking about the role of content, the role of your web presence, all of your digital marketing aspects. So that's probably the more tactical, if you will, of the steps. And then step number 5, as we just talked about, is to then, now that you've got this machine running, this engine running, to scale with your ideal clients by impacting their entire ecosystem.
Now, jumping back to that second step of what problem you solve. Now, we've been hearing for years, sell the sizzle, not the steak, but there's also the customer doesn't want a 1/4-inch drill, he wants a 1/4-inch hole, and so on. But what are some examples of that, real-world examples where the business had a good idea and a good product, but they weren't really recognizing what the customer needed from that?
Sure. So I'll give you a great example that I cite all the time because I think it drives home a real significant point. We were working with a tree service, a residential tree service that essentially your tree needed to come down. They would come out and cut your tree down. They'd been in business for about 30 or 40 years, I think maybe at the time. They were a family-owned, second-generation business. So, their message was, family-owned, local, second-generation business, which is nice. Nobody didn't like that idea. But when we interviewed their customers, which is one of the things that we do, and then increasingly we really scan Google reviews today, because people turn to third-party tools like that voluntarily and talk about something that exceeded their expectations, something they didn't expect to get, essentially the problem that you solve for them. So as I said, this company had all over their local business, been in business for many, many years. All of their customers said some version of they showed up when they said they would and they cleaned up the job site thoroughly. And that was the problem that their best customers, the ones that were giving them 5 stars, were saying that this company solved for them. Because anybody who hires somebody to come into their home and do some sort of service, we've all experienced that appointment window, around 5 hours or something of that nature, and
or 3 days later.
Or 3 days later, and so. That to me, that's what their customers were screaming loud and clear, is that this company was exceeding our expectations by doing something we weren't getting from anybody else. Nobody said anything about they cut the tree down beautifully. That's generally that's the expectation. They've got trucks, they've got chainsaws.
Right,
surely they cut the tree down.
The tree left on your property.
Yeah, exactly. So we actually changed that to their core message, but not just change that to their core message. We developed processes around an on-time appointment, 15-minute appointment window, or you get $100 off. I mean, it just became kind of the entire that problem, and solving that problem became the entire voice of their strategy as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important for anybody in that contracting business.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've gone through some improvement projects or other kinds of projects. Right. I have, and after every one, my wife and I say, boy, we could be successful contractors if we knew nothing about that particular trade, but we simply, showed up on time. If we weren't going to show up on time, we called the customer and said, hey, we're not going to show up on time. We're going to show up at this other time instead, and mention why perhaps.
Yeah.
And that simple bit of communication would solve all the problems. Yeah. But as you mentioned, when you're sitting around waiting and wondering where they're at, their time has passed. Are they going to show up in 10 minutes? Or are they going to show up in 2 hours? Or are they not going to show up at all? It's super, super frustrating. But, I think that if you look at these businesses, and I'm sure you have looked at these kinds of businesses, it's kind of an overwhelm situation where you've got, one key person or 2 key people, and they're getting texts from people on job sites saying, hey, this part isn't right, and they're dealing with all this stuff, and it falls through the cracks. When you encounter a situation like that, where do you begin to sort of reduce the overwhelm factor and
Sure.
Get things more organized and businesslike and into some kind of a framework?
Well, my mantra has always been that marketing is a system, and pretty much any way, shape, and form in which your business comes into contact with a prospect or a customer, you're performing a marketing function. So for us, that marketing, sales, service, is all really one thing, and that we have to actually figure out ways to start building processes to make sure that people have a great customer experience. But it really starts with just analyzing, what would a customer's goals be, at each stage of the customer journey? What would their questions be? So we start anticipating that. I mean, part of the challenge, and I know that you mentioned the overwhelm word, and it's increasingly getting harder to staff organizations. But part of it is anticipating what somebody would expect, what would make a great experience, and start building those systems so that you are not just completely reacting at all times.
Now, speaking of overwhelm, later in the book you talk about digital presence and digital activities and websites and inquiries and social media and such. That seems to be an area where not even just contractors, but
Sure.
every business of even any size is kind of experiencing overwhelm, because you've got all these social media channels, you've got obviously website, you've got changes going on, you've got the need to transform your processes to do a better job digitally. Hopefully, many companies are well along that path now, but there are certainly some that still have things to improve. How do you cope with that digital overwhelm and say, okay, these how do we get focused and say we don't have to do TikTok maybe, or we should be on TikTok?
Well, you used the word focus, but everything that we do in those first 3 steps is all about getting them to narrow their attention, narrow their focus, get the right message of problem solving in front of the right people. And what that ultimately allows us to do is it informs what not to do. If we're going to work with our top 20% of our best customers, maybe we don't need to be on social media at all. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's universally applicable, but I think it could be for certain kinds of businesses. I work with consultants and train consultants as part of the Duct Tape Marketing Consultant Network. A lot of them are solopreneurs that really have a very nice business and really no more objective than having 8 or 10 clients at a time, because we do almost like an outsourced CMO model. And yet they're getting on all these platforms, with the hope of getting in front of thousands of people. They just need 4 more clients. Maybe they should put all their attention on going to a couple networking events instead of worrying about TikTok or other things. And so when you develop strategy from the framework that I present in the Ultimate Marketing Engine, I think it informs what you should be focusing on, and it really identifies helps you identify the priorities so you can stick to what's going to be effective.
Yeah, reminds me a bit of Gabe Weinberg's strategy. Well, he wrote a book called Traction, which lists like 26 different ways that you can grow, but then also says you should focus on the one that works for you, not try and do all of them, which is a trap we all fall into. The new shiny thing comes along.
Sure.
Well, man, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and holy cow, now there's TikTok or Pinterest. Man, I should be on that because I hear about all these people getting business that way. And
well, and
you really have to decide.
It comes from that, the very first thing I think I mentioned, and trying to be all things to all people. That's what kind of leads people to saying I need to be in all places to appeal to all people. And so it really is. It's actually very stress relieving to businesses when I can get them to realize, that they actually should be doing less instead of more.
Is there anything else any other advice, John, that you would have for businesses, particularly smaller businesses, but really of any size?
Well, the advice that I've been giving for years, and if somebody says, what's one thing people could do, I always default to this, and that is really do this exercise to figure out who your most profitable customers are. And maybe they're the ones that are referring business to you today as well. And really sit down and talk to them. Make it a habit, quarterly, or maybe even more than that, to start talking not just about, how you're doing or what you could do for them, but what else are they not getting? How could you think in terms of this idea of scaling with them? How could you think in this terms of growing with them? I mean, when you get very laser focused on serving this top 20% of your clients, it will help inform what's the next product or the next service offering that you should bring to those people. Because when you've got a great working relationship with somebody, they already trust you. It is much easier to work with them in ways that are far more profitable than it is to go out and try to build a new division of your company and go out and get new clients. So that's really my biggest advice: is focus on get closer and closer to your ideal customer.
Yeah, it's such great advice, John, and it makes me think of the arborist or the tree company that we were talking about. And clearly they are focused on trees, and most companies like that are. If you look at their trucks, their people, their services, they are focused on maintaining trees and cutting them down, maybe planting them too.
Right.
But if they have a reputation for being very reliable, for showing up on time, for being responsive, having people who clean up when they're done and don't leave the yard looking like a mess, clearly there would be demand for landscaping services that would be very complementary to their business.
Absolutely.
And so, but I think often too we don't think that way. Think, well, hey, we're in the tree business, man. My guys know nothing about landscaping. That's totally different business. From the client standpoint, though, it's not a totally different business. You've got these big living things and the smaller living things. They're all to make the exterior of the house look good. It's pretty much the same area. And if you can extend what is already a good reputation in one area into a new area of endeavor, then by all means, it could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. John, how can people find you and your ideas?
Sure. Well, so pretty much everything I've been writing about and doing, you can find at ducttapemarketing.com, and that's DUCTTAPE marketing.com. Now, I have a special website just for the Ultimate Marketing Engine, and guess what? It's theultimatemarketingengine.com. And when you go there, depending upon when you're listening to this, if you go there prior to September 21st, you're going to see an offer to get a free companion course. So just click on that link. It'll tell you how to get our 6-video course with worksheets and resources attached if you pre-order a copy of The Ultimate Marketing Engine. So you can pre-order that copy. It'll be shipped to you in September, but you can start consuming the material in the course right away when you do that.
Awesome. We will link to all of those places and anything else we talked about on the show notes page at rogerdooley.com/podcast. John, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.